Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting. It does seem like we have a packed agenda. As my co-chair, I don't think he'll be staying for the whole time. So
No, I'll be leaving, yes.
I think we have one of these items has a potential action. So with that said, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Patton. You can go over
Mr. Chairman, we might want to do introductions first.
Oh, yeah.
Start with the corner, Mr. Zera.
Good afternoon. I'm David Zer, Charlotte Water.
I'm Jeremy Mills with Office of Constituent Service Communications.
Larkin Eggleston, committee member.
Shark Bakari, co-chair.
Braxton Winston, co-chair.
Christian Holmes, Charlotte Communications.
Dana Fenton, City Manager's Office.
Allison Craig, Planning.
Dana Donovan, Patrick Townsend.
Nelson Freeman with Kilpatrick Townsend.
Pamela Wideman, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Joe Neal with the Douglas Office.
Oh, hi.
Kim Bradford, Charlotte Park Association.
Nick Doesn't for the budget.
Charlotte Tanner, County Manager's Office.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today in this Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting of Charlotte, North Carolina. Mr. Fenton, we'll hand it back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, we're going to move up from the third slot to the second slot. Request for consideration of a change to the committee proposed 2020 state legislative agenda. This is an issue that was brought up last week to me by Planning and Housing and Neighborhood Services called amending state statutes to remove barriers to affordable housing. And Mr. Eggleston asked that this be added to today's meeting agenda for your consideration. Essentially, I'm not going to spend any time talking about it, but if Christian would get the presentation ready to give, and I'm going to let Allison Craig from Planning do the talking. She knows this issue inside and out, and I'll just let her go to it.
So why don't, just to tee it up for everyone following along at home, last committee meeting, which was several weeks ago, we went through, after all the pre-work we'd done, and voted up or down items to be considered by the broader council, which again will be next week in the business meeting, for inclusion in our state and federal legislative agenda. All those items have been done. We've had some initial conversations with council. This is the only one that is net new, that has not been addressed one way or another, and we're going to consider that today. So that's the background.
Thank you. So just to follow up on your point, the reason why we're here today at the 11th hour here right before you're about to propose your agenda is that Pam and Ty and I have been working closely for the last probably 4 or 5 months to try and find some ways to advance affordable housing in Charlotte. And so we've been working on a toolkit of a variety of different actions that we wanted to advance.
And if I might add as a way to help frame this conversation too, I would note that affordable housing is part of our legislative agenda. This is just a more specific tool. So this is not necessarily something new we're trying to add. It's something we're trying to refine and be more specific about.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, as you all are aware, we're in the middle of the comprehensive plan and the UDO. You've seen this slide a great number of times. But the relevance is that, as we've been discussing which items to put in this affordable housing toolkit that Housing and Neighborhood Services and Planning is working on together, we really didn't want to make major changes to policy and ordinance. So we talked about addressing the GDPs. We've talked about changing the density bonus, but those aren't things that we really want to address right now until we get further along with the comprehensive plan. So Pam and I put together this toolkit and really focusing on things that can either address the time that it takes to get a permit or the amount of money that it costs to get the permit. And so we put together a proposal as part of our FY21 budget request. And really the objectives here are expanding the production of producing more affordable units, producing different types of units, and accelerating production to remove regulatory barriers. So these are some of the things that we've talked about in our toolkits. We've talked about offsetting permitting fees. We've talked about addressing projects that are at 60% AMI, 80% AMI, a portion of the project, all of the project, for sale or for rent. We talked about expediting rezonings, permitting. We're going to have like 2 slots each month in the rezoning queue that are reserved for affordable projects. And then as part of the FY21 ask is having an affordable housing concierge. This is the go-to person for really anything affordable. The challenge is, and the why we're here today related to this, is we've been working and just keep coming upon state statutes, regulatory hurdles that we can't really get past. So as an example, on the permitting fees, you cannot waive fees related to, say, for Charlotte Water or user fee. The funding that comes in for those when you pay your fee has to be directly related. The use of that has to be directly related to that particular fee that you're paying. So for Charlotte Water, when you're paying those fees, it needs to go to water-related items. And you can't charge a different fee based on your status. You can only charge a fee based on what that particular project is actually in need of in terms of water and sewer. Same thing for user fees. You can't directly waive user fees. We got over that thinking that, okay, well, maybe if we put together a proposal, maybe it's general fund funded, then we can talk about fee reimbursements. And so that was fine, but where we really stalled out was when we got to this, diversifying the production. State statutes are very specific in that financial assistance can only be provided for projects that have 20% of the project devoted to 60% AMI or below. And so while I agree that that's a need in our community, there's other needs. There's a missing middle that we keep talking about. And the thing that Pam and I were talking about doing is sort of layering on incentives depending on the level of affordability or the type of affordability commitments the project could take. But we really thought that something at least 80% or below would be important and impactful for our community, particularly when you're talking about mixed income properties and wanting to incentivize developers to include a portion of affordable units in their project. So here's the actual language in the state statutes, and you can see the definition is very clear, saying at least 20% of the units in the project are set aside for the exclusive use of low income, and persons of low income is defined as those that do not exceed 60% AMI. And this also goes for multifamily rental housing as well. So what we're proposing to do is make a minor but very impactful change to the state statutes to include low and moderate, which actually is more consistent with the other sections in this particular state statute that talk about low and moderate income, but for some reason this one particular sentence does not include that. And moderate would allow us flexibility. It's defined as persons deemed by the authority to require the assistance made available pursuant to this chapter on account of insufficient personal or family income. So that would allow us as a city, when we're creating this sort of incentive package for these types of projects, to define what is important for Charlotte. And other localities, if this is changed, would be able to do the same thing for theirs. And so I see Charlotte being a lead is giving more flexibility and more tools to different municipalities to incentivize the types of projects that they need in their community. This also is more, the 10% is more in line with what the percentage is for both mandatory and optional incentive criteria across other cities. And so it would also be putting us in a more consistent position. So the request for today is to ask the committee to amend your legislative agenda to include these changes and send to City Council on February 24th. And if approved, we'd work with Reebok and some of the other folks that we've been talking to that are in support of these changes and move forward with introducing them to the state.
Councilmember Newton.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. Something that does jump out to me, I would be in favor, and I would ask my colleagues to consider the possibility of including an additional objective where we incentivize in areas that are challenging right now for us. I think that there are certain areas that, particularly for, say, the development community, and for us, the gaps that exist are too extensive for us to, too extensive of a hurdle for us to clear. But it doesn't mean that, I don't think that it means that we shouldn't be trying to come up with ways. Maybe the state can help with its 9% deals, but ways for us to make sure that those areas are also, open to the possibility of affordable housing, kind of really expanding our footprints, and at the same time seeing to it that that the opportunities are kind of expanded out throughout, our entire city. And so to that extent, maybe making that one of our objectives to figure out some way to incentivize development in the more challenging areas, particularly more financially challenging areas for us.
And I know that council adopted a locational policy related to Pam's group that generally speaks to some of that in terms of how they prioritize funding. And I think as part of the comprehensive plan, there'll be some proactive measures that we're wanting to create investments in certain areas to help incentivize development in those areas that are challenged. And so I think those are two areas that we can do that. But in terms of objectives, we can add that as a priority.
And what I mean, so just to kind of clarify, I'll give you an example. We're seeing a lot of development occur, say, here downtown. And it's a lot of upscale, right? Development, very expensive development. And for us, it's very challenging to work with the development community to make sure that affordable housing is going in here downtown as well because of the financial cost involved. And if there were a way, and maybe it's purely aspirational, but if there were a way for us to incentivize that, particularly because it's very difficult for us locally to do that, but maybe if the state could help in its 9% deals or otherwise, I think that would be very helpful for us locally.
So, I think we might be wading into a much broader conversation that will take a lot of diligence and understanding of what those incentives mean. Based on what I'm seeing, I think this is the start of that, right? This is the thing that says right now, and Pam, maybe could you join us as well, since because I'm sure you might have some things you want to address. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what this looks like is today, developers come to us and our statewide statute requires a very rigid approach to 20% under 60% AMI, and a lot of people probably walk away saying, I cannot financially make that deal work. So what you're saying is, with the flexibility of bringing that down to a 10%, or what you've said, you believe you will have the ability to make net more deals work, which might increase overall units. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Very fair, sir. And that, Mr. Newton, thank you for your comment. That's exactly what this does. This is an incentive to provide mixed income development units in some of those developments that you're seeing going around in areas of greater influence, if you will.
So the only question I had, which wasn't very clear to me, but I'm just looking at this for the first time, I see the changes in percentage in the words in the current statute that you've shown. What things does that allow us to do? Is it basically any deals where we would subsidize portions of it and enter with, let's say, the Housing Trust Fund, or is it something other than that?
So what we're proposing, this is an incentive, and the hope is that with the right incentive mix, it wouldn't require, or it may not, and oftentimes require an additional infusion of Housing Trust Fund, but it allows a developer who does want to provide some level of the lower mixed income in their existing development and still make the performer work.
I guess what I'm asking is, I get the definition itself. A housing project under this area, at least 20%, bring that down to 10%, right? But is there some reason why that definition, even without any city or state money, matters to them? And I'm trying to figure out, so what ways would we see this materialize or be executed upon once it was changed?
So right now it just says low income, and so we're proposing such that it says low to moderate. That way you get all the way up to the 80% of area median income. As it reads now, at least 20% of the units have to be for 60%, and what we often hear was without that ability to include 80%, the deals just don't work. And Allison, I don't know if you're hearing that.
So that would relate to not just our developers, but like the housing authority. Don't they develop their properties on their own without our money sometimes? So would that relate to other developments like that as well as just with city dollars?
I think this is really just city dollars, right? So this is allowing us the flexibility to be more creative with our incentives that we provide.
So housing authorities, so for example, when we look at this gives us more flexibility with our dollars, but if you're a private developer coming in, right, we would hope that this would also be an incentive well, but Allison is correct. I mean, this is with our dollars. We're saying with our dollars, you still have to have at least 20% of the units for 60%.
Our dollars are where this may matter on a broader scale later in other creative ways, but for right now, what you're saying is that, for example, today, I might see and then bring you one deal with 20% that we use housing trust money for that generates 20 units, but I could have 5 generating 10 units each for the same or less amount of your money, making it go farther, because people leave a lot of these deals on the table because they don't financially make sense.
Correct.
Yes.
But there's also applications here that would not involve city. I mean, this could be people bringing deals to us that are not trust fund deals.
But then why would it matter? I don't know. Because
we're talking about some of the
because it
permitting and
qualifies.
fees and stuff.
Okay, all right.
So suddenly now we could start expediting projects that are bringing 10%, 80, AMI to the table and start creating some permitting reimbursements for even those projects, incentivize them.
So there's incentives for people that would potentially, hopefully entice them to come to us and say, here's a project and it's got a little bit of affordability. And I'm not asking you for money, but I would like, there's ways to to expedite the process or hopefully offset some of the fees in a way that is not a housing trust fund ask.
That's right. Right. So it's about trying to leverage all of your tools or create more tools and leverage your existing. So to the point Mr. Eggleston raised, someone might decide to do that without needing any trust fund dollars, right? And so that's another incentive. Speed to market, we've all heard that. The more time they're spending in the regulatory process, the more money they're losing, if you will.
So said another way is that whether we're spending city dollars or not, something qualifies as an affordable project.
Correct.
By definition.
Correct.
And by changing the bar here, whether that affordable project gets city dollars, state or federal dollars, or simply enters a special process of expedited, less red tape and bureaucracy, all of that matters.
Opens up more deals.
Okay.
So, Ms. Wyman, talk to me about the housing framework that we pass. Because don't we have minimums in that framework that are greater than 10%?
So that's a great question, Mr. Winston. So in your framework where we talk about where there is an infusion of trust fund dollars, where you're using trust fund dollars, the person still has to meet 20% of those units for 30% and below. So we're not talking about changing that.
If we change that, if we're advocating for the state law, doesn't the change in state law potentially preempt our policy? Doesn't that say, hey, developers can that opens up the door for developers saying your policy goes against state law. So we don't have to, we should be able to get these housing trust fund dollars without having to meet that 20% of 20% of units at 30% AMI.
We still have the decision on how to use housing trust fund dollars.
But we have it in our framework. Our policy states. Can you again repeat what the policy states in our housing framework?
The policy, your local policy, your local housing trust fund states that if a developer is requesting housing trust fund dollars, at least 20% of the units have to be set aside for households earning 30% and below the area median income.
So how does that not run up against the change in the state law?
I mean, my understanding is that that's sort of the state regulatory framework, and then the city can make decisions, policy decisions, and regulatory decisions that supersede that. So, but what we can't do is enact things that the state statutes don't allow us to do. So that's the problem that we're in right now with this particular statute, is that we're not allowed to do that because the state has specifically told us we can't.
Yeah. And so the way I look at that, Mr. Winston, and this is great, and so this is a great conversation. So we're trying to have some consistency within the state's legislation. And so really where I think this will be most helpful and give us more flexibility, more tools. This is for a developer who is not requesting trust fund dollars. We've heard time and time again, a developer wants to include some affordable, but either they can't make it work because of the 60%, 20% of the units having to be for 60%, or they can't get through our regulatory processes fast enough. So I don't think.
I would ask the lawyer then. I would ask the lawyer. I mean, if why wouldn't a developer come and challenge this? Say we should get housing. Our deal is not going to allow us to reach your framework numbers. We still deserve it because of.
Yeah, so I think we're mixing different programs together, where you've got certain rules for certain programs, and the state law piece is going to be separate and apart from that housing trust fund piece. So there are going to be different rules for that. This isn't the end all and be all of how a city can engage an affordable housing project or incentivize it. This is just one piece of that particular puzzle. So we're kind of mixing apples and oranges.
They can put any amount of affordable housing mixture into it that they want today. The question is if they want it classified a certain way by the state or the city, or they want to use things like the Housing Trust Fund or a new expedited affordable process that reduces the time and the expense. They need this. And we can't give it to them without the state allowing us to do it.
Correct. And the other thing, Mr. Winston, I don't know if it adds any comfort, but when folks are applying for your trust fund, they are responding to an RFP, right? And in that RFP, we have very explicit language. If you want this money, your development has to check these boxes, and the 20% for 30% is one of the boxes that it must check in order to be compliant with our RFP.
So is there a motion to put this forth to the council or not?
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion. I think this expands our ability to find ways to get to the housing that we're looking for, and I don't think it does any damage to the tools we've got, but I do think it adds a tool and adds some flexibility and hopefully incentivizes the development community to bring forward more stuff.
I'll second that.
Yeah. So I'm wondering what kind of deadline we're under on this, because I still need to wrap my head around it a little bit more personally, and I don't want to be kind of the person that sidetracks something if it needs to be done in an expedited manner. But I don't know if that's the case here. I do feel like when we talk about affordable housing in our city, I do feel like it's more than just the numbers. It's about quality of life, and so that's why location is so important to me. And I get it, kind of when we dig deep into kind of the statutes here, I think that might be a little too nitpicky, but from the standpoint of overall objectives, I think that's also very important, and I think that these statutes could, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that these statutes could actually support an objective like that, and I do think it's important that be noted in the objectives. But having said all that, I feel like this is the first time I've seen this. And so I might need a little bit more time to think it over.
I think the good part of it is that you have a full week before we vote as a whole council if it makes it out right now on this motion. I mean, I'm just hearing about it too. I understand you guys have been working and you found this opportunity, and we have to move quickly on it. I think I've wrapped my mind around most of it very quickly right now, which is this ability enables us to have flexibility, yet doesn't require us to accept anything. Again, it's still our decision, whether it's a 3% deal or whatever, or it's an expedited process that we let things go through. Ultimately, we still decide on those. So this just gives us more flexibility to decide. I would think that the next week should be more than enough time for anyone to get there. And I think we need to reach out to council members, not in this committee right now, well ahead, literally later today, so they can start reading, because we don't want anyone to feel like they're in that spot next week.
It doesn't seem like a lot of time to me. And with Braxton's question a moment ago, we talk a lot about state preemption, and that's something I'd like to learn a little bit more about. And a week seems like not much time for us to talk about that, meet with our colleagues, et cetera.
Well, I'll say I will vote to send this out of committee but I am not comfortable with right now in my understanding of voting for this to put on the legislative agenda on full council. I agree with Mr. Newton. When I first heard about this, having more flexibility within our own rights, I was even questioning whether this has to be another agenda item. I mean, it seems like this could fit under affordable housing and local control, greater local control of our dollars and such. So I don't even know if it needs to be voted onto the agenda. It fits under those two things that we already passed. But I would even ask, if we're asking for this change, why are we even having, why 10%? Why don't we just have some? And as long as there are some units of affordability, that would give us the greatest amount of, right? But I still don't understand. It says right here, if an authority provides financial assistance to multifamily rental housing project of at least 10%, I don't see why a developer, if we're not voting for a housing trust fund project because it only provides 15% of those units and it doesn't fit our framework, but my brain still isn't wrapped around how those things are two different arguments. And I would fear that if we rush into this and we do see success in this, that we're actually kind of falling back on some of the commitments and the work we've been doing with the public around our housing frameworks and affordable housing.
So I think you guys probably have some work to do in socializing a bit of this in the next week. I think it's fair that we bring it forth based on what I've seen personally.
Sure.
But know that this is what you'll be up against. So making sure everyone feel like they had the time to move on something quickly yet digestive. Sure.
And so I hear and appreciate the conundrum. So we'll do exactly what you said. Reach out to council members and continue the conversation.
I would say the community too. I mean, we had a whole process.
Let's get this done in a week.
a year and a half ago or something like that, or 2 years ago, where we engaged the community about this. And this seems like this can be, on the positive side, a really good thing, but I'm not totally sure that there couldn't be, some pain in there as well.
And last thing, if I might, one of the community engagement, you're right, Mr. Winston, we did a ton of community engagement around the $50 million, right? How we use the Housing Trust Fund and the plan. One of the things that we continue to hear over and over and over again from the private sector was bring these exact tools that we are suggesting to you. That would be an incentive for us, the private development community, to help us. So here are your points.
All those in favor of moving this out of committee, yet diligence being done over the next week prior to council voting next week, say aye.
Aye.
And I'm an A.
Nay. All those opposed?
Right here.
All those opposed? Got it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There is a need to broaden the position statement of affordable housing that you have right now, and can you bring that up, Christian? No? There we go. Go ahead. Okay, go to the first slide. Okay, this is, the current statement is above, and it really was geared to what the committee last year approved and the council approved. What we're already trying to seek through, provide relocation and rental subsidies. The proposed statement is on the bottom, and we drafted that this morning to reflect this issue being included in there. We think it's broader, so we would ask for you to consider the bottom statement to include in what goes to the council next week.
Is this the right committee to have this discussion?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes. You all are the ones who made recommendations to the full city council on what's in the legislative agenda.
Let me ask the question.
Yes,
Mike,
Mr. Edelson.
I think I have the same question you do. It was a hard transition there, but you transitioned into the statement we have underneath our affordable housing bullet on our legislative agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, that was.
You need a softer transition flow.
Well, it sounded like,
I understand that. You want to revise, I see, you want to revise the normal thing under our affordable housing statement.
That is correct.
yeah, for federal and state.
Just for state.
Just for state.
Right.
Okay, so on page
I'm supporting.
4, slide 8 is the statement that you want to modify to this.
Yes.
I thought you were still talking about the last thing we just finished talking about. That's why I was confused.
This is just simply to make it broader to reflect the discussion today.
Okay, so I would not be against this but for, and I think this gets back to my point a moment ago, I'm not seeing anything, and you had said, Dana, now this is something that we had approved recently as a council.
Yes, sir. The current affordable housing statement was approved by this committee last month on the January 27th.
Oh, and you're saying that we need to think about this proposed one?
Yes, broadening that statement to incorporate what we've just been talking about.
So I guess my one criticism with the statement that is proposed is I'm not seeing anything here that addresses, in my opinion, the need of affordable housing throughout our entire city, particularly in high opportunity areas, rather than just, wherever we get the numbers, which I think could, in my opinion, lead to a problem of concentration that I think is counterproductive for some of the goals that we've stated as a council over the years. And that's my one criticism for the proposed, and what I would ask would be included, in my opinion.
I was just going to point out that this is something that this committee already passed without that language. So I think we're just tweaking something that we as a committee had already supported.
I don't know if I was on the committee at the time. And I think,
Last month?
I'm not going to say that when I can see this clearly now, that I'm just going to kind of go along with it if I feel like it's important.
So you're asking for action to
Yes, sir. Usually, when we come to you with our proposed state legislative agendas, we always have that position statement.
Do we have this written on a piece of paper? I need to see this on a piece of paper. I'm not able to compare these two things.
And I guess for me, the question is, is it important or is it not important for us to make a statement that we need to make sure that our commitments to providing affordable housing includes affordable housing in every area of the city, particularly those areas of high opportunities. And I think that that's just reasonable, in my opinion.
So what is the difference between these two statements, and what is the structure of these two sentences do differently?
Well, in the proposed statement, on the second line, it reads, reducing regulatory barriers. That's exactly what you all have been talking about in this first item. And in the first part, it talks about expanding and preserving the supply of affordable housing, and that's right out of your affordable housing framework.
Move to approve the proposed affordable housing statement.
Second.
Can you repeat what you were just saying, please?
The first part, expanding and supplying and preserving the supply of affordable housing, is right out of your affordable housing framework. That was adopted, last year or 2 years ago?
2018, August 2018.
So why is that not now important to include on our legislative agenda?
Well, that's what we're proposing, is to include it in there.
You're saying the proposed statement is straight from the thing the policy that we've adopted.
That's correct.
Yeah.
He's trying to align them.
Oh, okay.
And the second one, reducing regulatory barriers, is something I believe was talked about in the framework in some respects.
It was.
But we did not have it in the previous position statement.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'm going to be against this one too.
Yeah.
And it's simply for the reason that I stated a moment ago. I think if we have the opportunity to put in writing a policy whereby we ensure that affordable housing is provided in all areas of the city, particularly in those areas of high opportunity, which is in the best interest of folks that will be living in that affordable housing, we need to take that opportunity, and we're not doing it here if we just pass that. So I'll be against this.
I'm not taking the plan.
Okay.
We'll just stay, we'll
The
just
noes
stick
have
with
it.
the current.
You
statement.
could, yeah, you could just stick with the current one.
Okay, thank you.
And I was telling my colleague over here, I know words are very important, when you're dealing with these things, and I just don't, right now, it's the first time I'm seeing it, and I'm not going to vote yes on something that I don't understand the necessity of right now, and it hasn't been explained to me right now. Ms. Wyman.
Yeah, so I don't want to belabor this, but you could, and I know you're done, you've already taken a vote, and that's fine. You really could, what I believe the attempt was here was to align a current position statement with your framework and to include regulatory barriers, right, to align that language. What you simply could do is include regulatory in what the statement that you all had previously adopted. But again, I think the whole overall intent here was just to be more consistent with the framework.
Right. Well, we need just a longer conversation, and I mean, it's literally the first
Sure.
time I'm seeing this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I want to go back to the, what we had for the second item.
Yes, sir.
Originally, and this was simply just to give you all the opportunity to do a review of the February 3rd strategy session where the co-chairs presented the committee proposed legislative agendas. And there was a discussion at council. There were a few items that received quite a bit of discussion. And so I want to provide the opportunity for you all to see whether you want to have any discussion about that. Because, next week is when we go to the city council for adoption of the committee proposed agendas.
Well, I guess I can start. I know one of the items that we talked about was local control. Since then, I have asked staff to go back over I think it was the past 3 or 5, I don't know if I put a time period, to look at all of the times that council has brought up topics of more local control. I haven't seen that list yet. Talked about it as approaching this issue from a macro and micro, saying, hey, we would like more local control overall. Here are specific examples of things we can get. Something like this item that we just talked about. Could we have more flexibility of how we spend our resources on affordable housing? I haven't gotten that yet, but we have asked staff to get that so we can consider it next week. Mr. Newton?
Yes, I had a question about the income discrimination conversation. Have we made any headway on that? Did I maybe miss something there?
Was there anything done last week on source of income discrimination? Or was there
Yeah, I guess that's my question.
I don't recall any discussion unless I have completely blanked.
It's still on the table, though.
I'm not sure where it stands right now.
Okay.
And I know that there is a coalition that has been talking with council members. I don't know whether they talked with the mayor or not. So I don't know what the status of that discussion is, frankly.
Would that be something that at this juncture we could talk about? So is it something being considered or not, I guess is my question at this point.
It's not
I can't recall if it's
recommended.
something, okay.
It's not part of your proposed committee legislative agenda. I don't believe that we've had a talk about it here in committee as well.
Did we talk about this during the strategy session?
We talked about it during the strategy session. I guess what I hear Mr. Newton asking is for a recap of that conversation. What was the conclusion of that conversation that we had around the dais regarding source of income discrimination and advocating for removing those barriers on the state level?
Well, actually, I don't recall that discussion. Mr. Baker, do you remember there being a discussion about that last week? You what?
I think we should,
I don't whole discussion.
we had a discussion about it, and we should get Ms. Ajmira, I believe, brought the topic up.
Yeah, so if you could get information, I mean, if we could look back at that and get some information now, I mean, are we in a position right now to if it happened in strategy session, are we in a position right now to talk about that, or we need to hear back from that, from the questions or
I think there
strategy
was a
session?
conclusion that it was the state legislative agenda wasn't the appropriate place for that right now.
Okay.
But again, like I said, I don't remember the entire
Yeah.
conclusion and the direction of that conversation, so that's why I hear Mr. Newton asking for.
Yeah, I'm real sorry, Mr. Chairman, because I truly don't remember that from last week, but when you bring that up, I can elaborate on that a little bit more, is that if you were to try to go for legislation like this, it's better to do it in a long session, because you have the bill filing requirements to follow in a short session. It has to be a topic first that's non-controversial, and I can tell you right now that this is a controversial topic. And also you have the local bill filing requirements you have to get every single member of your delegation. We have 17 members to sign on to it. And there's no guarantee that you can get all 17.
Would it be all right with Mr. Newton if we got the minutes from that portion of
Yeah, I think
the
that'd be
meeting?
great. I mean, I think that this information's fantastic, Dana. I mean, I can't recall how that was resolved, but I do think, I mean, if it was on that level, then the answers need to be returned on that level, and I guess it's beyond us here on this level in the committee. I would too. But yeah.
I would ask for just the minutes of that
I'd love to hear
discussion
those,
be
or see
shared
those.
with the committee members, and we can go
Yeah.
from there.
It's, we'd have to get those from the city clerk,
Yes.
and I'm not sure when those will be ready. I did go onto the city's website to try to watch the audio or watch the video from the February 3rd meeting, and it's not available for some reason.
It should be available. I shared it, so it should be there. So even if we don't have the minutes, they can splice either the YouTube feed or the Facebook feed from that part of the discussion and send us a link that way if the minutes are not available. That probably would be more helpful and faster and easier action. All right, so
Fine for you.
anything else on that topic? We can move to number 4.
Number 4, congressional briefings. Committee on Wednesday, March 11th. That is the day that we've set aside for congressional briefings, when you all brief our delegation members on the 2020 federal legislative agenda for the city. And our lobbyists are getting appointments lined up right now. The night before, on Tuesday, March 10th, our lobbyists will be hosting a briefing for you and a dinner to do a preview of those briefings, provide some information about the environment in Washington. And right now we have about 9 members of the governing body that will be attending. I think we'll have a pretty good showing, as we usually do on this.
Any questions, comments from the committee? Move on to number 5.
Yeah, number 5. Chairman, you might go to number 6 real quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is the General Assembly delegation briefing. We do some querying, your all schedules, and also the delegation. It looks like Tuesday, April 14th, or I know that Tuesday, April 14th is the best day out there. The delegation has asked for a dinner briefing, and since you and I talked at 1:30, Mr. Chairman, we've gotten word that we can have the event at the Mint Museum. They have free parking there. It's not an extra cost to the city because apparently we already make a financial contribution to the museum in some way. So we'll be able to use our own caterers. So we're going to be running with that.
Sounds good.
Uptown location or the Randolph location?
Uptown. So you get to see the beautiful skyline from that area.
That's the 14th at 6.
Pardon me?
It's the 14th, April 14th at 6?
Yes, 6 p.m. And we put holds on all of your calendars for this too, so that was done last week.
Sounds good.
All right. Moving back to number 5, last month we talked about a joint meeting with the Mecklenburg County Intergovernmental Relations Committee. It is scheduled for Tuesday, March 24th, from 1 p.m. to 2:30. And I put at your places on the dais a draft agenda for that meeting. And I just wanted to point out a few things to you. There is a spot in there for both the county and the city to just let the other know about what's in their federal and state legislative agendas for 2020. Then the next item is a stakeholder presentation, and tentatively the county plans to have a group from Charlotte East, which is an advocacy group, and Mr. Newton, you're shaking your head in the affirmative.
I've heard of them.
So you know.
Once or twice.
And they want to talk about greenways, and specifically greenways as an alternate mode of transportation. And what I've learned since then is that they also plan on bringing forth some sort of a resolution that would show support for greenways, and I have not seen that resolution or anything like that. So I just wanted to run that by you all. Normally, the city council doesn't pass resolutions in support of a policy objective. There might be resolutions honoring people and things like that, and different commemorative events, but normally not in favor of a policy issue. So I just wanted to bring that up with the committee to see if you all had any feedback or.
I know we have had many different discussions. Some of us are not afraid to do things differently than we have done in the past. Some of us have actually come here to do that. But I don't know if, obviously we don't speak for this committee doesn't speak for the whole council. But I don't know if we would we would definitely want to know in advance what we're getting ourselves into, even if we're not taking a vote on anything. So the more information we can have, and I guess we can reach out to our counterparts on the commission to understand what their expectations are around that. One thing I would ask in preparation for that meeting for Mr. Baker, looking at greenways, talked about looking at greenways as a transportation mode of transportation. If we could take a look at, I think it's the car rental tax. I think that is what it dictates you can use that for, because I believe that one is you can use it to create public transportation systems. Whichever one of those special tourism tax buckets relate to public transportation, I'd like to go into that meeting knowing about.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
All right. Chairman, that's all I have for today. Next is committee discussion, if you wanted to have anything like that.
Anybody on the committee have anything they want to discuss?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.